I had always cherished the idea of camping alone in the forest. The thought of being enveloped by nature, isolated from the city's chaos, thrilled me. So on a Friday afternoon, I packed my tent, sleeping bag, and supplies and drove to the edge of the foreboding dark forest. I parked my car, shouldered my backpack, and ventured into the depths of the woods. The sun was still high as I reached a small clearing. The trees loomed tall and dense, their leaves whispering ominously in the breeze. Birds chirped, their sounds a deceptive contrast to the growing sense of unease. I set up camp, gathered firewood, and lit a small fire. As night fell, the forest transformed into a realm of shadows. The crackling fire and the occasional hoot of an owl became eerie lullabies. Wrapped in my sleeping bag, I stared up at the star-filled sky, feeling a mix of solitude and exhilaration. Suddenly, a rustling in the bushes shattered the calm. My heart raced, but I dismissed it as an animal. The rustling grew louder, more insistent. I sat up, peering into the darkness beyond the firelight. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice wavering. No answer. I grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the bushes. The beam revealed only swaying leaves and branches. I exhaled shakily, convincing myself it was just a deer or a raccoon. Still unsettled, I added more wood to the fire, hoping it would ward off any curious creatures. The sensation of being watched persisted, the hairs on my neck prickling with unease. Hours later, just as I was about to retreat to my tent, I heard footsteps. They were deliberate, crunching on the fallen leaves. My blood ran cold. This was no animal. "Who's there?" I shouted again, my voice echoing through the dense forest. Silence. I grabbed a large stick for defense and stood by the fire, my eyes scanning the darkness. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. Just beyond the fire's reach, he stood still, watching me. He remained silent, his presence oppressive. Panic surged through me. I had to escape. I backed towards my tent, keeping my eyes on him. Without warning, he began moving towards me with a menacing speed. My instincts took over. I bolted into the forest, my heart pounding. The darkness swallowed me, branches clawing at my arms and face. I heard him gaining on me, his footsteps growing louder. I stumbled over a root, falling hard. Pain shot through my ankle, but I forced myself to my feet and limped through the underbrush. Guided by the faint moonlight, I stumbled into a clearing and saw a small cabin with lights on the inside. I banged on the door, desperation in my voice. "Help, please help me." Tears streamed down my face as the door opened, revealing an old man. "What's going on?" he asked, concern etched in his face. "There's someone after me. Please let me in." I cried, glancing over my shoulder. The old man stepped aside, and I collapsed inside, exhausted. He locked the door and peered out the window. "There's no one there," he said. "Are you sure you saw someone?" I nodded, still shaking. He was chasing me. The old man handed me a blanket. "You can stay here tonight. We'll sort this out in the morning." I thanked him, my voice barely a whisper. As I sat on the couch, wrapped in the blanket, I felt a fragile sense of safety. The old man kept watch, but despite my fear, exhaustion claimed me, and I drifted into a troubled sleep. In the morning, the old man and I returned to my campsite. There was no trace of the stranger. I packed up quickly and left the forest, swearing never to camp alone again. The peaceful solitude I once craved had turned into an unforgettable nightmare. Before we move on to the next chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Your support is very important for more dark stories. Story 2. The Mysterious Guest. It was a dark and stormy night. Rain lashed against the windows of the old, creaky hotel where I worked the night shift. My name is Alex, the night receptionist at the Moonlight Inn. The hotel, with its faded red carpets and peeling wallpaper, had seen better days. The few guests remained were already asleep in their rooms. As I sat at the front desk, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the incessant rain and occasional thunderclaps. The clock on the wall ticked with a menacing slowness. Suddenly, the front door creaked open, shattering the eerie quiet. A man stood in the doorway, drenched to the bone, water pooling at his feet. His dark coat and wide-brimmed hat obscured his face, but his piercing eyes glared through the shadows. "Good evening," I said, trying to mask my unease. "How can I help you?" The man stepped forward, leaving a trail of water behind. His voice was a low rasp. "I need a room. Do you have a reservation?" I asked, though chill ran down my spine. "No," he replied curtly, "but I need a room now." His old-fashioned attire and the unsettling familiarity of his presence unnerved me. I hesitated, then asked for ID. He reluctantly handed me a driver's license. The name? Jack Harrison. As I returned it, I noticed his hands trembled slightly. "Room 13 is available," I said, handing him a key. "It's the only room left on the ground floor." Jack took the key without a word and disappeared down the dimly lit hallway. An overwhelming dread settled in my stomach. As the hours passed, I tried to focus on my work, but my mind fixated on Jack. Something about him felt wrong. To ease my anxiety, I searched online and found a chilling article about Jack Harrison, a man wanted for a series of violent crimes who had vanished without a trace. My hands shook as I dialed 911. Explaining the situation in a whisper. The operator assured me that police would arrive soon. The wait felt endless, every creak and gust of wind amplifying my fear. When the officers arrived, their serious expressions mirrored my anxiety. I led them to room 13. They knocked, but there was no answer. Knocking louder, they called, "Mr. Harrison, this is the police. We need to speak with you." No response. One of the officers motioned for me to use the master key. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door. The room was empty. The bed was pristine, and the window was open, rain soaking the carpet. The officers exchanged worried glances. "Are you sure this is the right room?" one asked. "Yes," I stammered. "He was here." I gave him the key. The officers searched thoroughly, but found no trace of Jack Harrison. It was as if he had evaporated. "Call us if you see him again," one officer said, handing me a card. "Keep the doors locked." I nodded, stunned. They left, and I was left alone in the hotel's oppressive silence. I watched security footage, but there was no sign of him leaving. As dawn broke and the rain subsided, I explained the situation to the arriving staff. They were baffled, as was I. To this day, I wonder about Jack Harrison. Some say he still lurks in the shadows, waiting. The stormy night at the Moonlight Inn remains a haunting mystery, the strange man vanishing without a trace. Story 3. The Haunted Factory. On a chilly autumn evening, my friends and I decided to explore the old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. The place was rumored to be haunted with tales of eerie creatures and ghostly sightings. Despite the warnings, Tristan, Bobby, Sarah, and I, driven by curiosity, ventured inside. The factory was a sprawling ruin with broken windows and rusted metal doors. As we approached, the wind howled through the empty halls, sending icy shivers down my spine. We squeezed through a gap in the fence and made our way inside, our flashlights casting long, jittery shadows. Tristan, ever the daredevil, suggested we check out the elevator shaft. We followed him through dark corridors until we reached the shaft. Tristan peered into the abyss below. "I think I see something," he whispered. I leaned in but saw only darkness. "Probably just a trick of the light," I said, though doubt gnawed at me. Bobby, the skeptic, dismissed it as nothing. We continued exploring the factory's desolate rooms, filled with old machinery, broken furniture, and debris. The air was thick with dust, and every step echoed ominously. Suddenly, Bobby stopped. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice a shaky whisper. We listened, holding our breath. A faint rustling sound, like something moving quickly, filled the silence. "It's probably just rats," Sarah said, though her voice betrayed her fear. We pressed on, unease growing. In a large room, we discovered a makeshift camp, old blankets, empty cans, and a small fire pit. "Looks like someone's been living here," I noted, deciding we'd seen enough. We headed back, but then Bobby pointed to a shadowy figure darting across the hallway ahead. It moved too quickly to be human. "Did you see that?" he asked, pale. Before anyone could respond, Sarah screamed. We turned to see a tall, thin figure standing at the end of the hall. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light. "Run!" Tristan shouted, and we fled down the corridor, the figure in hot pursuit. As we reached the stairs, I glanced back. The figure stood there, watching us with eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. We burst out of the factory, our breaths coming in ragged gasps, and didn't stop until we were far from the building. Panting, we tried to rationalize what we had seen, but the glowing eyes and the sinister presence defied explanation. "Maybe it was just a person," I said, though I didn't believe it. The figure had been too unsettling, too otherworldly. Tristan, usually so confident, was unnervingly quiet. "I don't know what it was, but I don't want to go back," he said. Sarah shivered. "That place is cursed." As we walked home, we attempted to laugh off our terror, but deep down, we knew something inexplicable had happened. The memory of that night, the glowing eyes, and the feeling of being hunted would forever linger in our minds. Some places are better left undisturbed, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. I hope you remember to leave the lights on before going to sleep tonight. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video for more horror and suspense. See you in the next story, but beware, no one is completely safe.